Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. Hello. We're live.
Did I say that like a boomer?
No. You're solidly Gen X.
Well, I am, but I'm right on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I was born the year, apparently the cutoff year for Gen X. But yeah. But thank you. No, thank you for helping me with that. That's good. Sorry I cut you off.
Oh well, I mean, when millennial becomes a new boomer, I'm on the cutoff from millennial to Zoomer. So when
that's
millennial
right.
becomes an anti-old thing to say in like 5 years, I'll get that.
So wait, are you a young millennial or an old Zoomer?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, because I talk to old people a lot. Like, I can't understand the Zoomers. Like, I genuinely cannot have conversations with people under 25.
To me, just so you know, like you seem, regardless of your age, like you seem like actually a member of the quiet generation.
Yeah,
that's before the boomers. That's the people in the 1920s. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
You got an old soul, brother.
Mm-hmm. The John Prine song, "Hello in There," just wrecks me to my core. And old people just grow lonely, waiting for somebody to say hello in there. So whenever I'm in a room with an old person, I'm like, I know they've seen the most life and they need somebody to talk to. You know,
this is correct. This is the correct. Yeah, the older we get, the sadder we get. So everyone should know that and be nice to us,
dude. So this is the 3-year anniversary of the world going crazy. Like, this is the week 3 years ago that the lockdowns first happened. So all the videos of that are resurfacing. Like Fauci and Trump for the first time talking about the lockdowns. And I was working for a old learning center. I would teach West African djembe to some people in an old learning center. It wasn't a retirement center. It was just a center for the aging. And this was like the only community that a lot of people 60 plus had. And these lockdowns happened. And I just know that these people faced the most crushing isolation. This is one of the things that really, really radicalized me, is that, old people just lost all sense of community 3 years ago. And a lot of them have never recovered.
What was happening in nursing homes, I just can't. I mean, and the Andrew Cuomo thing was just the tip of the iceberg as to what was going on. I mean, I think this was all over the world, really, but certainly in this country. I mean, old people became prisoners in solitary confinement. And I mean, all the pictures and videos of like people talking through glass to their grandchildren and stuff like that, you know, I know. I mean, it was just that what they did to old people and kids is where I will never forgive. Never. Masking kids, locking up old people. No, man.
And funerals,
monsters.
Things like funerals that got like either postponed by 6 months or never happened because everybody was afraid that the air was poisoned, so they never got together. Like, that's the most anti-human thing ever.
Well, okay. But you know, I'm on a little bit of a new tip on this, right? Like the
virus could have been real, and we need.
What if the United States still has bioweapons labs all over the world, producing God knows what, and leaks have happened. By the way, there's a long history of this. Sam Husseini has written about the history of lab leaks in this country, and you know, one of them could be actually what we were told COVID was, but you know, the real deal that really does kill some huge chunk of the population, and including the healthy population. That's a real possibility, especially if they're doing bioweapon research, right? I mean, the stuff that is intended to kill. What would you do then, sir? What if a virus was released that you know, that was actually an existential threat to you and your loved ones? Would you? I mean, I know I pressed you on this before, and I'm sorry to begin this.
It doesn't matter, man. All the powers that be, all of the people who I trusted with authority to make decisions on this, lost all of their credibility 3 years ago. And it's up to them to re-earn my trust back before the next emergency.
Wait a minute. You're not going to evaluate the situation on your own. It has to come.
I mean, I will, but I'll listen to people I trust, like Alex Jones, people who I trust, like Owen Benjamin, who got this right.
True.
Yeah.
True. It's funny that I laugh at that, but it's true. I mean, Alex Jones's record overall, is like his batting average is way above anybody in the mainstream media for sure, and certainly above politicians because they lie for a living. But yeah, I'll listen to Alex Jones when that happens, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's what I did. Literally, he talked about interdimensional vampires using this as like some giant emergency in the turning point to bring upon like global tyranny.
But what if Alex Jones is like, you must lock yourselves in your house? I can't do it. So Alex Jones is a Jewish guy from New York now, but he says the horse thing. I can't quite do that. I've been working on my Zelensky, but Zelensky's got the best voice in the business. I mean, he's the best. He's the most fun name to. No, what if Alex Jones is shouting at you?
We have the documents. We have the documents.
Yeah. The CCP's gotten us this time.
Yeah.
Lock yourselves in your house.
I might then, but still, I'd be cautious. I'd weigh his opinion against others, but yeah.
No, the question is about policy. It's not about what you would do. Of course, you would lock yourself in your house because you're not stupid, because you don't want to die. I'm saying, would you favor mandates?
No, never.
Lockdowns and mask mandates and vaccine mandates.
Never.
None of them.
No.
Okay. Never. When the bubonic plague is just wiping out the American people, you're just going to be like, no, we're cool. Let it go. I'm a libertarian.
At that point, it'll be the Darwin Awards. The people who get vaccinated will survive, and the people who don't will die. And that's how justice will be dished out.
It would be nice to have a Darwin Awards for real, finally, to do some culling, thinning the herd. It's about time. We need to thin the herd. The thing is, it's not so much the herd, it's the people at the top we need to thin out. There's some serious stupidity out there.
Yeah. That was
not just the thing about the elites, and this is a major cultural shift that no one's adequately explained to me. The elites went from being evil to being evil and stupid. And I don't know why. I mean, I can have some theories, but I mean, that's really true. I mean, the elites back in the day, it used to be Henry Kissinger, who would be like killing millions of people, but, could write a doctoral dissertation, no problem. Now it's just a bunch of dumb shits running everything, including, the economy, which we will talk about. But yeah, anyway, we need some Darwin Awards, or just I won't say, I was about to say something really violent that would have gotten us booted.
Yeah. Okay. I got to say this, rest in peace, Bobby Caldwell, the Larry Bird of soul.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Who was this again? Who is Bobby Caldwell?
He's an R&B singer from the late 70s, 80s, 90s. He was sampled by Biggie Smalls. He was sampled by Jay Dilla for the tune The Light with Common. He wrote What You Won't Do for Love. He is on you start playing him, it sounds like a Black family reunion. Everybody Black thinks that he's Black because his record label made his album cover a silhouette of him and never showed his white face until like his third album. So everybody thought he was Black. And yeah. Open Your Eyes. Blue-Eyed Soul, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite. Well, he just died?
Yeah, he just died yesterday, yeah.
You and I should do something every time a white Negro dies. We should commemorate it, because there's so few of us in the world, and we're dying out. I mean, that's the thing. It's fewer of us every day. We're like, World War II veterans at this point. There's just a few of us hanging on, and we're hoping for you, young man, to carry forward the tradition. Do you know about Mez Mez, the jazz player from the 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, Jewish guy who fully identified as Black and said he identified as Black. And he was well known for being the major supplier of drugs in the jazz world. And he wrote a great memoir. It's called, Really the Blues, I think it's called, Mez Mez. And he was one of the top, sax players. I think he was sax.
Clarinet.
Like. Right.
And sax, yeah.
Yeah, but he was like legit. He was top level. He played with everybody, but he fully identified as Black. He married a Black woman. I think he had children with her, and he died of an overdose, of course. That's what happens when you lose your identity. No, I'm just kidding. He found his identity.
Yeah.
He was the first Rachel Dolezal, and he pulled it off, though.
Yeah. Sublimation is what it's called, where you lose your entire identity to form a new identity. You lose your identity, ego death for art.
Correct, which we should all do. That's a noble life. We live for art.
It really is. Yeah. Man, I know I've been bringing up David Allan Coe every week, but his first album out of prison is a spoken word odyssey with soul music and everything. And literally, he just got out of prison, and you could tell that he'd been talking to black dudes the whole time he was in prison. And he's talking late 60s jive in spoken word poetry over blues music and soul music. And there's lyrics that, like, my hair is blonde, my eyes are blue, but there's black blood in these veins, brother. And
oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're making me think of Brandon Caserta, who was on Unregistered several months ago, who was set up by the FBI and charged with plotting to kidnap the governor of Michigan, and spent a year and a half, 18 months in jail. And he was in a jail cell. He was never in a regular prison. And he said he was the only white guy there. And it was like he shared a cell, I think, with about 20 guys. And he said they were all black. Yeah. And they had a great time. And they loved him. And I'm like, wait, but you're like supposed to be a right-wing racist. I'll guarantee you that there are far more Trump supporters who are cool with black people than there are Biden supporters.
Yeah. Well, on the jail tip also, I know some people who've been to jail, and if you're a white guy in jail or prison, even, gangs are formed along racial lines. So do you want to join the Nazi gangs, or do you want to join the black gangs? And there's a lot of white dudes who join the black gangs because they don't want to be with the Nazis.
Are you stupid? No, you join the gang that's going to win. What are you talking about? There's no place for principle here.
Okay.
you just survive. I'll sign up. I'll do the Heil Hitler if I know that they're better fighters.
And if the numbers work out a certain way,
yeah, exactly. If we can win the Rumble. No, I'll join. I'll join the damn Mexican gang if they can fight well.
Okay, I want to talk about art a little bit more in this. Prison has left our collective consciousness, and this is why I really like you interviewing people like Brandon Caserta or drug dealers or people going to jail.
Jared Klickstein.
Jared Klickstein, Dan Music.
Dan Music is in prison now. Yep.
Yeah.
Marvin, way before your time, one of the first Unregistered was one of the classics. It was a 3-hour interview with Marvin Mutch, who did 41 years in San Quentin for murder. And he denies to this day that he committed the murder, but I pressed him on it. I was the only person to ever publicly press him on whether he did it. But yeah, 41 years in San Quentin, a prison that I drive by on a regular basis that has a view of the bay, but it's a maximum security hellhole. Yeah, I would love to do more stuff. There's actually a podcast that's out of San Quentin. Prisoners in San Quentin are allowed to do a podcast from there. And I'd love to get somebody again on the show to talk about that, because we need to, I'd like to know what's going on with the 2.3 million people in those places in our country.
Largest prison population in the world, and
history of the world. History of the world.
Yeah. And it's
China.
I was just saying, it's gone out of our collective consciousness. Like, we don't see prison movies anymore. There aren't any songs about prison like there used to be. We just don't think about it. It's kind of a taboo, and we just, as a man, those are probably my two biggest fears: being drafted and going to prison. And we don't talk about prison at all anymore.
100%. Yeah. I'm with you all the way on that, of course. Yeah, you're right. It's not in the public consciousness. We don't have movies about prison. Isn't that odd? Like, we had BLMs. I know. Lots of great movies, tremendous movies, lots and lots of them. Yeah, so we had BLM screaming at everybody for years, and what did we get for it? Nothing. We don't even have greater attention paid to the issue. They only succeeded in channeling the attention to race again race, and alleged white supremacy and all these abstract phantom things that they conjure up. Never have they said, hey, let's turn the camera on the inside of the prisons and show people what's really going on and what that means for people and the effects of it. I think 13, Ava DuVernay's crappy bullshit documentary, was the last attempt by them to say anything about current prison conditions. But yeah, you're right. It didn't. We continue to talk about slavery, although they know nothing about the history of slavery. But yeah, BLM never was interested in any serious correction, any serious reform. And consequently, we have what we have, which is, guess what? The exact same number of prisoners now as there were when Mike Brown was shot. So, yeah, nice job.
And
race fanatics.
We're radical prison abolitionists, I guess, in some sense, more or less.
I've been less and less of one on that. Yeah, I don't know. And I get that from people who share my politics broadly, who have been in prison, and they all say, oh no, a lot of these guys need to be locked up for sure. A lot of these guys, I mean, most people in prison are guilty, clearly, and many of them are just violent criminals who can't stop themselves from being violent. You know, I don't know. I mean, like that kid, what was he, 19 or 20 in Memphis, who just walked around the city one day shooting white people randomly, killed about 4 of them a few weeks ago. Remember that? Like, what do you do with that person? You have to. Unfortunately, there's some people, and you know what? For those people, I think actually for them, prison's probably better because they have stability and security. You know, they're fed, housed, they're taken care of, and they probably have better lives and certainly longer lives in prison than, you know, shooting at people in the street.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
A lot of people will explicitly admit that. A lot of people who've been to prison will explicitly admit that they don't know how to live outside of the government giving them a couple meals a day and a nice bed to sleep on. Which
is a major theme in many of the great prison movies we were talking about. You know, you see often they'll follow the guy once he gets out of prison. I forget which movie it was, but they followed a character in the movie who had been in prison, sort of like Marvin Mutch, for like decades, an older 70, 80-year-old white guy, and they finally release him. And they follow the character like as he gets an apartment, and he goes in the apartment, he's all alone, and he looks around, and he has no idea what to do. And so he kills himself, which is also quite, I think, common for ex-cons, you know, especially older ones like that. Can you imagine? I mean, Marvin got out when he was in his 60s. You know, he spent his entire adulthood. He went in when he was 20 something, I think 21, and he got out when he was 60 something. So, wow. I mean, he wasn't, I mean, the internet didn't exist when he went into prison, you know, and he hasn't used the internet or cell phones or any of that stuff. But yeah, I'd love to pay more attention to it. The problem is, of course, it's a little bit of a dark subject, but yeah, I value, stories like that, and I value seeing inside of institutions like that, which are so hidden. You know, I mean, I think deliberately hide what goes on in prisons. I think the biggest untold story is everybody knows the numbers, everybody knows how many people we incarcerate, they know about that scandal, but the more and more I hear about it, and I know more people who have been in prison ever than in my life, partly because of the show, partly because I have friends who are in trouble. They all talk about the prisons and jails they've been in as third world level, like the conditions of those prisons in the United States, even minimum security. I mean, Dan Musig was describing his minimum security federal prison as some place I couldn't imagine spending a day in. It's just beyond awful. And I mean, yeah, and I hear this again and again and again. I don't know how people survive that, but that, you know, and you compare American prisons to, say, European prisons, it's night and day. And I think even a lot of third world prisons are better than American prisons. Partly because we have many prisoners and everything's overcrowded. That's part of it. But man,
and the conditions in jails are just as bad, if not worse, sometimes. I think Brandon Caserta was describing his conditions, and he said, I think he said this, that he felt like it was designed to break him into a plea deal, you know, that having conditions be so bad, especially if you're there for months on end. You know, he was in jail for months, you know, in a holding cell meant for several prisoners only for a day or two. And yeah, he felt like it was meant to break him.
Yeah, when he told me that was, boy, did I feel some despair. I mean, that they have that power over people, to force them basically to cop a plea, just by putting them in barbaric conditions. Boy, that's nice work. I mean, we are a much kinder, nicer society, I believe, generally than we were 50, 100 years ago. There's just, I think, although not in that part of our society, the criminal justice system overall. Although the one thing I will say, and the people do not like it when I say this, and I've certainly changed my tune radically on this. I mean, it is remarkable how few people cops kill in this country. I gotta say. I mean, yeah, it's 1,000 people a year total, but 99% of those people were armed, and most of them had guns, and most of them were shooting at cops. I mean, it's amazing, in a country this big with this much violence and this much sort of ethnic conflict and these many guns, especially, that the cops only kill about 10 or so unarmed people per year. In a country of 350 million people, many of whom are criminals, just straight up. I don't know how they pull that off. I mean, I think they do it by the shock and awe policy that they adopted since the 1980s of using overwhelming force, having body armor, just complete ruthlessness when they arrest someone or take someone down. I think, the use of military tactics is what we're talking about, which, that began in the 1990s. You can read Radley Balco's great book on that.
Rise of the Warrior Cop.
Rise of the Warrior Cop. Yeah. I mean, Radley has gone astray badly recently, politically, but that's a great book. And it certainly really shows how and why the cops in this country operate the way they do, which is as a military force. In fact, where was it? There was something happened in some city recently. I forget what it was. And they were showing the cops who were getting ready to go confront some guy. And it wasn't like a major terrorist or serial killer. It was something, I don't know, someone who was like barricaded inside their apartment and refusing to come out. And they showed the cops were going to go in to get him. And it looked like Desert Storm. I mean, the gear, the outfits, the uniforms, the helmets, the body armor, the guns, it looked just like the army. And but the good news there, and this is something civil libertarians should ponder, is I think that actually results in fewer deaths, which might be counterintuitive, but I think criminals, suspects, people being chased or hounded by cops like that are simply more likely to give in, and I think less likely to fight back. I could be wrong, but it sure seems that way. How else do you account for the fact that they only kill about 10 unarmed people a year? And by the way, many of those were pretty aggressive, provocative people. They weren't just like walking down the street and the cops walk up and shoot them in the head. If you read the actual case stories, you see that a lot of those people were violent too. So they kill very, very, very few people who are unarmed. Don't you think overwhelming force, the use of overwhelming force by the police department, might actually have some benefits for us?
Well, it's like that Machiavelli thing, right? If you want to use force, you better be prepared to use totalizing, disarming force that will make your enemy completely debilitated. Like you better, if you are willing to use force, you better be willing to go all the way. And when people are violent, you need good people, for lack of a better term, to use violence to stop that violence. There's no way around it.
Yeah. Where the cops learn this new policy, which really is a new policy since the 90s. They learned it from Colin Powell and Desert Storm. Shock and awe. The use of overwhelming force to defeat the enemy actually goes back to the Reagan administration. It was originally the Caspar Weinberger doctrine, which was an anti-neocon, anti-imperialist doctrine. It was that this was Reagan's policy. He was not interested in regime change or invading countries or occupying countries. He was interested in destroying America's enemies, for sure, crushing them, but then leaving. Like if there's a problem in the world, some country is rising up or some movement is threatening America in some way, you go and you destroy them instantly, like with Grenada in 1984. But then you leave. Poof, gone. Leave them alone after that. Show the world what's up, but don't don't be an occupying force in any way. And that was actually taught to police departments across the country in the 90s and 2000s. This is in Radley's book. But of course, once again, there's a foreign policy angle. It's interesting that
right there, Foucault's boomerang.
What's that?
Right there, it's Foucault's boomerang.
What do you mean?
The policy abroad being applied domestically.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's Foucault.
Yeah, the boomerang, the imperial boomerang. It's Foucauldian.
I should know this. I've not heard of him.
Oh, dude, this is totally you, man.
Well, probably. If it's Foucault and foreign policy, it probably sounds like me. Yeah.
Yeah. From Wikipedia, the imperial boomerang, or Foucault's boomerang, is the thesis that governments develop repressive techniques to control colonial territories. They will eventually deploy these same techniques domestically against their own citizens.
I'm just wondering where he said that, or is this like Foucauldians have said this? Is this Foucault himself?
First advanced by Hannah Arendt in The Origins of Totalitarianism. So
before Foucault.
Apparently, she took it from a 1976 from Society Must Be Defended, a paragraph in that 1976 lecture.
Oh, huh. Okay. Wow. I got to look at that. Fascinating. Yeah. Yes, Foucault's right. As he's always right. Yes. But
I'll read the paragraph. Here, let me read the paragraph real quick.
Yeah, sure.
This is what Foucault said. While colonization, with its techniques and its political and judicial weapons, obviously transported European models to other countries, it also had a considerable boomerang effect on the mechanisms of power in the West and on the apparatuses, institutions, and techniques of power. A whole series of colonial models was brought back to the West, and the result was that the West could practice something resembling colonization or an internal colonialism on itself.
Whoa. Well, that does sound like Foucault. Okay.
Yeah.
I am unaware of that. That is amazing. That's awesome. He just gets better and better the more I find out about him. Mm-hmm. It's hard to prove that, the causation that is the cause of increased repression here at home domestically. But I mean, it sure corresponds, the more the US has gone outward since 1945 and established itself as a semi-colonial power across the world, the more they have used repressive militaristic techniques to quash dissent here or just quash civil disorder. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but here's the thing, dude, colonialism has its benefits for the colonized. This is something that the post-colonialists never want to deal with, which is that, if you go talk to many Indians, they'll have some visceral negative reaction to the British Empire. But then if you ask them whether the British improved their lives, they'll definitely say yes, because it's indisputable that the British did in material ways improve life for most people, and not all, of course, but for most people in India. I mean, there were some, deliberate famines and stuff like that, the killing of millions, but besides that, once they actually consolidated control over India, I think the death rate went down. I know it went down. Of course it did, overall death rate in that country. So, and people had, running water and electricity too by the end of it. And
a lot of people, same with Iraq.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Totally. That's what the first thing Paul Bremer did when he started reconstructing Iraq. He said this. He said, we got to get them an electrical grid, because the infamous thing about Iraq prior to the invasion in 2003 was that they had brownouts over and over again all day long. To live in Baghdad sucked because you couldn't even have dependable electricity. And Paul Bremer, when he went in there to reorganize their society, he said, we got to get this electrical grid going. And that's what they did. Less than a year, I think in 2003, 2004, they had a full-on beautiful electrical grid. And I believe to this day, your lights stay on in Baghdad because of this. So colonial powers, if they are intelligent at all, will do just that, because that's how you control a population. You give them the things that they want and need. That's how you control people, not by just repressing them and brutalizing them and enslaving them. You have to give the people what they want and need. Then they will be compliant. So,
yeah,
more militarized cops, more warrior cops, man. We need more
warrior cops. Yeah, And then the big connection, obviously, is police departments buying actual military surplus equipments for their new
That was
SWAT
part of
team.
it.
Like, why do?
That was part of it.
I mean, I'm from a suburb that has a SWAT team with a sniper team, like a famous sniper team. Like,
Oh my God.
why? Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Look at me. I'm like a goddamn like John McCain tonight.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, why is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, as we acknowledge that there are very bad people out there who need to be taken out in some way or another.
Yeah.
And I mean, if the bad guys have big guns, which they increasingly do, by the way, and many guns, which they also have now. There's now more than 1 billion guns in the United States. Wouldn't you rather the cops have the ability to take out the really bad guys? Because they're not gonna use their machine guns and tanks on us, or will they? Is that the fear? Is it the fear of giving the government power to quash any rebellion? Is that it? That good old Second Amendment argument, which I really like a lot. Is that it? I mean, which is sort of far down the line, though. I mean, it's very unlikely we're going to have a real revolution like that in my lifetime. And if we did have a revolution, I'm not even sure I would be in favor of it, because they often tend to have a lot of violence when in them. But don't you want the cops to be able to do their job at least?
So I'll bolster your argument a little bit more. The militarization of police departments accelerated after that LA bank heist in 1997.
That was amazing.
Inspired the movie Heat. Yeah. So the LA cops were completely unprepared when these criminals had heavy artillery to do this bank heist.
Right.
And then the school shooting started happening. So like Columbine, you've got really aggressive heavy artillery being used against civilians. And we need SWAT teams, or you need good guys with guns if that's what might potentially threaten civilians. So I get it. But you also have Waco and you also have Ruby Ridge. And
yeah, you do.
Yeah. So
that's right. And the cops couldn't have killed all those children and those innocent people, especially in Waco, without the heavy equipment, without the military equipment.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And the tactics too. I mean, they basically treated that like an invasion of another country. I mean, the way they went in. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. You win.
Yeah.
It's something to think about, though. I mean, and I really would like people to think about this who are sort of on our side generally in regards to the cops. I would like them to look at the stats, look at the numbers of unarmed people, innocent unarmed people who are killed by the cops. It is tiny, and that needs to be explained. And it also needs to be acknowledged by those of us who are hostile to the cops generally. I mean, I still hate the cops. And I was just looking at statistics the other day about do you know about this? The domestic violence rates among police in the United States?
Oh, it's like what, 40%?
It's just off the charts. Well, it's something like, I think it's 14. They are 14 times more likely to beat up or kill their spouses.
Yeah.
Than everybody else. It's just off the charts. Yeah, it's close. It's like, I think it is like 40%. Yeah, that's right. I think it's 40% of cops' spouses have reported domestic violence. It's just nuts. And I think for everyone else, it's like less than 20%.
Yeah. Wow. So like an argument for making policing better is to pay cops better, or to make the job a little bit more prestigious in some ways. Like for a lot of cops, you're basically being paid the same as a garbage man. So like, why would somebody, I don't know, 40 grand a year, something like that?
No, cops
really?
make good money. And then,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think they get to six figures pretty quickly in most most cities. Yeah, and then in New York, you know about cops in New York, 20 years you get full retirement, you get a full salary after 20 years. So like, there's lots of guys in their 40s in New York City who are living really nicely, and never have to work again. No, it's
Well,
they get paid. They get paid pretty damn well.
Okay, regardless of pay, there's that stereotype. I'm operating on stereotypes like I always do. That cops are people like they were the loser in high school, and they just want to assert a little bit of authority wherever they can. Maybe they were the bullies, maybe they were bullied, and they want.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we need to like really examine the question. I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but like do a psychological examination of police overall and explain why someone would choose to be a cop. Like what kind of person would choose to be a cop? I mean, I have to think it's someone with some sadistic tendencies, because that's what the job is. I mean, no matter what, I mean, you're going to be hurting and controlling people for a living. That's what you do. That's what a cop is. So you have to do the dirty work of society. So society finds the sadists to do that. The people who actually like hurting and controlling people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many women I've known who have had cops either beat them or stalk them or harass them or threaten them. It's I mean, like in relationships, like there should be a warning put out to all women: do not date cops. Even if you find alpha males sexy, don't do it. Go date a football player instead, or an MMA fighter. They're much more safe than a cop. I mean, really, there should be like a consumer warning label on every cop.
Well, and then there's the wide-eyed cop who's in it for all the right reasons, but then they get destroyed by the job because they see people at their worst all the time, every day.
Oh, right. And at the same time, I get it. Like, as I've said, I think on this show a few times, like if I were a cop, and I had to work in East Oakland, I'd probably do some violence and some brutality. But this is why I don't choose to be a cop. That's exactly why. Some people want that stuff. You know, so it's the same people who join the Marines, right? And I've had a couple people on the show who were Marines, and they talked about how they really wanted to shoot someone. That's why they joined the Marines. They like really wanted to shoot someone. And then Michael Wood, who was on my show many years ago, he was a Marine. Then he was a cop in Baltimore. And I was like, oh, now it explains why you were a cop too, and why cops are the way they are. It's society needs someone to do that dirty work. And so you have to find the people who want to do that kind of work, who want to hurt people. That's what it is. So, I mean, I don't know how to fix that though. I mean, because there is dirty work to be done. Sometimes we do have to hurt people and control them, and you and I aren't going to do it because we're beta wussies.
We're beta wimps.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah.
It's a conundrum. I don't know, and I don't know how to solve that. I mean, except for just more and more community policing, like more and more people taking responsibility for the security of the place they live in, and that can happen at any moment, and that's always a process of like people taking more responsibility for the security of their town, of their neighborhood. People do it. You know, there's neighborhood watch groups that form all the time. They're really effective, and that's you just have to have more of that. I mean, we could have a nation of community watch groups, I think, which of course then we have the Trayvon Martin case, which that's exactly what happened. And I don't know.
Your arch nemesis, Sam Harris, when he wrote his piece on gun control, made the point that you want as many people, as many quote good guys with guns as possible. If you're a responsible person, in good mind, a good moral person, you want that person to be a responsible gun owner, and you want as many of those people out in the world as possible. You want as many people trained in martial arts as possible. You want the good people to know how to use force.
Yeah, I mean that's the old libertarian argument, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, right. Well, it's the Maj Touré argument, and it's not just an argument; it's what Maj does. You know, he trains people. And his goal is to train as many people as possible to use firearms effectively and safely. And I guess that's right. I don't know. We haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen a society like that in which that's full. Well, actually, yes, we have. I take that back. Switzerland, as I understand it, requires. Is this right? I think it requires gun ownership for all citizens, and Switzerland is not known for its mass murders either.
Yeah, I think you brought this up before.
I think that's right. I'm not sure, but
it's yeah.
Yeah, and Switzerland's doing great.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the law, but looking it up, there's 2.3 million firearms in Switzerland in a population of 8.4 million people. So there's a big gun ownership. I mean,
maybe it's
27.6 guns to 100 residents is pretty high. It's pretty darn high.
Yeah, I think maybe there are sectors of the population that are required, maybe men of a certain age or something. I think there's some kind of requirement. It might be like in rural areas they're required to have guns. That could be. Yeah.
But 1 in 4 is insanely high.
It's still, a lot. Yeah. Although, wait, that's one person. Wait, it's how many? What's the ratio?
Around 1 in 4, 1 gun to 4 people.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what it is here.
Yeah, more guns than people.
It's 4 guns to 1 person now.
Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, with ghost guns, I mean, that's what the estimates are. Was it Cody Wilson? Who said that to me? Told someone on the show said that it's well over 1 billion total guns now, which, mostly because of the ghost guns. Well, not mostly, but partly because of the ghost guns. An incredible proliferation of guns over the last 20 years, and especially over the last 10 years. And then, though, here's the best argument, the best libertarian, Maj Touré, pro-gun, Second Amendment argument is look at the graphs. I mean, yes, we had a bit of an uptick in violence and crime in the last 3 years, but that was mostly because of COVID and the lockdowns. But the overall trend, of course, has been violent crime has just plummeted since the 90s, while gun ownership has skyrocketed. I mean, that to me is all you need to know in a sense. I mean, that's kind of the proof right there, right? That mass gun ownership is good.
Well, at least that doesn't cause crime, which is
right.
Yeah.
Right.
All you need to know.
But I think it has something to do with the reduction in crime. I mean, I think it's mostly that, we just locked up every single criminal in the country in the 90s. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, as you're saying, it does not, that's kind of proof that it does not cause violent crime.
Yeah. We got to talk about this bank collapse because this is massive. I was super informed about it yesterday and all the facts got jumbled in my head, but now is the time to start listening to your economics people. If it's your crypto people like Anthony Pompliano or your gold people like Peter Schiff, whoever your economy person is, start listening to that person right now. You know about the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and everything going on here?
Yeah.
I want to mention like that and Signature Bank. The way it was reported first in the news is like, oh, this is crypto's fault. These banks made a bunch of bad investments in crypto and they blamed that for it. But like Silicon Valley Bank, it was treasury bonds. They put all their money in long-term treasury bonds, which were supposed to be safe, but yeah.
So David Sachs, who is a major venture capitalist here in Silicon Valley and has a big podcast called All In and is just a major player in Silicon Valley and a very smart guy. And I'm not saying he's right, but he has an argument that he's been making that this was caused by regulators and by the Fed raising interest rates, which made those T-bills worthless that SVB owned. And that's what caused. I mean, that's his argument. So it's all caused, and then also lack of good regulatory oversight, that they were just asleep at the wheel and weren't checking the balance books of the bank, and therefore, so it's an argument he's making. Therefore, if it was to him, it was caused entirely by government actors, by regulators and the Fed and legislators, all, and therefore, the depositors should not be held liable for this, and they should be made whole by the government who caused the problem in the first place. That's his argument. I think it's a pretty good argument.
Yeah, I'm really struck on this because the depositors, well, it's tough. The depositors are not at fault here. And before you blame the Fed for raising interest rates, blame the Fed for having interest rates be near zero for so long and inflating the bubble where everybody thought that there would just be free money forever, which is why they invested in these long-term treasuries and why there was a bubble to pop in the first place. Yeah, interest rates had to go up eventually, and I think people knew this. You know who the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank was?
The
Greg
name?
Becker.
No.
Greg Becker. He was on the board of directors at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco.
Right.
And he cashed out on the stock in December of 2021. So it wasn't necessarily the peak, but it was way higher than it was before the crash. And I'm pretty darn sure that he knew the interest rates would rise over the course of 2022, which is why he got out. And Barney Frank is on the board of Signature Bank.
Right.
And so there's a huge revolving door thing happening here where the regulators are on the boards of these banks, and they got out in time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Barney, as I understand it, he successfully lobbied to exempt Signature Bank, on which he serves on the board of Signature Bank, to exempt them from the Dodd-Frank regulations. And that's apparently like the cause of what happened with them. I mean, wowza. I mean, and apparently Barney Frank knows nothing about banking also. I've heard this from other pretty knowledgeable sources, but
yeah, he's been a public servant his whole life, and then he writes the regulations, and then he gets a revolving door job at this bank and lobbies to get rid of the regulations.
Well, but he's gay and a Democrat, so he can do no wrong.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, the culpability seems to me to be certainly with regulators and the Fed, but also to some extent, it looks like with the people who ran the bank, right? The executives who ran the bank. Yeah, and there is a revolving door going on here. And I heard about the connection to the SF Fed, and that seems to me just straight up grotesque cronyism. And he should, I hate putting anyone in prison who's not violent, but I mean, he should pay some consequence for sure. Do you want to put people in prison for nonviolent crimes? I don't.
Man, people like him should be washing dishes or doing something to pay back the depositors. The money getting paid back to the depositors should not be from the taxpayers. The reason why stuff like this happens is because I guess they know that if anything bad happens, the government will bail them out. So you can be as risky as possible, and you can pay yourself because you're on payroll of the company. And if the company goes down, you've still got your bonus and you still got your salary. So you're not liable for anything that happens. You'll go to some white collar jail, maybe. Worse comes to worse if they want to make an example out of you. But I mean, this is a story of 2008, and this is a story of our financial system. Nobody faces any consequences, and the bubbles get reinflated and they get bigger, and the crash is going to happen,
Yeah. Well, that's the bigger systemic analysis. And there, I think the libertarians and the Austrians are basically correct that banks should not be regulated at all. And there should be no Federal Reserve, of course. There should be no central bank. But again, though, I mean, the web has been woven, right, that we live in. And so, and the problem happens within that. You kind of have to deal with it within the system, I think. You can't, there's no bill on the table right now that I'm aware of to end the Fed. Since Ron Paul's gone, right? I mean, that's not going to happen. So what do you do now in the here and now? And the thing about this that's different than 2008, as I understand it, is that so the banks were placed into receivership, meaning the federal government now controls them effectively. As I understand it, and no one knows for sure because they haven't released all the details of it, but it sounds like they are going to make the depositors whole, but let the bondholders and the shareholders fail. So that's different. That's different. And that's much more palatable to me, and I think to most people. So if that's true, if that's what the federal government's doing here, seems to me it's hard to mount much of an opposition to that. Or am I wrong?
Well, I'm kind of okay with that to some. The problem is that it's the American taxpayer who's fronting the bill, and the American taxpayer is going to suffer this through the inflation that happens for paying for this.
Mhm.
But yeah, if it's to avoid a financial crisis, because these depositors are multi-million-dollar corporations that need access to capital in order to run, and
Mhm.
this is a bank that was like number one on Forbes like best banks list a month ago, and everybody
Oh,
thought this was so safe. Yeah,
they got an A rating from Moody's, for God's
yeah,
sake. And the FDIC just checked off that they were just fine. But they got an A rating from Moody's, I think just last week or 2 weeks ago.
yeah.
So so that whole network of people who oversee the banking system, that's who's
Mhm.
culpable, and that's who should, I
But
think, pay
here's
the
the
price.
problem, though, is that it can if it continues this moral hazard, like the system is so messed up, where like the moral hazard that caused this thing to happen still hasn't been solved, and
Mm, yeah.
you know, this people should feel safe putting their money in a bank. And if
Mhm.
a bank that has an A rating from Moody's is fit to go under because of corruption like this, then
Mhm.
there really is no safe place to put your money. And a much larger bank run is kind of inevitable if people start paying attention and start worrying about their money. They should really take their money out of any institution and hide it under their mattress, or put it in Bitcoin, or put it in silver or something, buy whiskey or something.
Well, so, you know, Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, they created the FDIC and,
Mhm.
insured deposits in banks, because of the bank runs that were, by the way, constant. I mean, for decades in America and I think in Europe too. 19th and early 20th century, bank runs were normal in life. That just happened, and the FDIC was created to alleviate that, to address that problem. Um, so your deposits are insured up to $250,000. You cannot. The government is on the hook to make you whole if a bank goes under and loses that money for you. Are you are you in favor of that? Are you in favor of an FDIC form of insurance or not? Do you want to just let them go on their own and just
Let the banks
freewheeling,
fail, because
let
what you
them
had
fail?
before FDIC was private insurance. So why would anybody do the responsible thing and pay for private insurance anymore if you've got the FDIC?
Nice. Nice. You're making me think of my good friend David Beto's book, which is an awesome book. It's called From Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. It's how that the New Deal programs basically forced out or crowded out all these social welfare mutual aid societies that were providing all these services that the government then provided.
Yeah.
And I mean, everything from like healthcare and health insurance to property insurance to job placement services, job training. I mean, all the things the federal government does now was being done by mutual aid societies, private mutual aid societies in the early 20th century, and they couldn't compete with the federal government, so they all basically went out of business. And yes, bank. That's right. I forgot about that. There was some depositor insurance, some kind of mechanisms in the mutual aid societies too that were private. So yeah, man, well done. I like that argument a lot.
Mhm. Yeah. The world is a dangerous place. There's no way around things like bank runs. You just need to
Mhm.
empower people to make responsible decisions for themselves. And nowadays, our financial system is so corrupt. Inflation is taking away what 8% of your money each year. So you got to make an
Yep.
8% return. So you got to gamble in the stock market if you want to keep your wealth at all. So man, like something like this happened, just it sends these horrible ripples out throughout the entire economy, like treasury bonds. Like, let's say your financial advisor said, "Oh, treasury bonds are a great thing to invest in, but you want to take your money out at any time, so put your money in a treasury bond ETF." Well, that ETF just crashed, because this bank was so corrupt. And people, we don't have sound money right now, so we need some form of sound banking. And yeah,
Mm.
uh, crypto might be the way out of it, but you know, precious metals might be the way out of it, but it's pretty grim out there.
Crypto, even though it's not responsible for this, is still taking a hit from this, right? Because people think it's about crypto.
Crypto's rebounding. Crypto was kind of, estimate, like, let's say Bitcoin went from 20 grand to 25 grand. So a pretty sizable jump since this news came out. Yeah,
that's good. I mean, it's just being blamed for it, though, right?
Yes. So it was blamed for it originally, and then that's what the left-wing establishment blamed for this. But then the right-wing establishment blamed, not establishment, but the right-wing grifters blamed Get Woke, Go Broke, and ESG, because Silicon Valley Bank especially had all these sort of woke investment practices, and but that's also a distraction.
Yeah, that's not what I mean. As David Sachs said, he said if wokeness caused the bank failure, then the entire Fortune 500 would go under, because all the Fortune 500 corporations are super woke, as we all know. So wokeness did not cause this. As I understand it. I mean, no serious analyst is even mentioning that as a factor in this.
Yeah.
Speaking of inflation, today I got gas and it was $5.60 a gallon. And I was shocked. I mean, it had been sort of going down gradually for many months, and I guess it just went back up in a big way. But inflation is and then the grocery store, man, is worse than ever. Food seems to be, in my experience, worse than ever. I don't know what the numbers are on this, but I know they're bad, actually. But this is now getting scary, and there seems to be no end to this. And I don't even know how you would. What are the plans? I mean, what would someone do? Like, what would you do if you were the boss of the economy?
Boss of the economy?
Yeah. Meaning, like, if you controlled everything, government, what would you do?
Man, I mean, El Salvador made Bitcoin a currency. I would maybe try to do that. It's super volatile right now, but it's a simulation of sound money, and we need to adopt something like that. Maybe go back to the gold standard. If I was the boss of America and wanted to get us back on sound money, I would do something like that.
What would the disruptions be like, though, if they announce that?
No, I don't know. My plane would be shot down. That's what would happen for sure.
Yeah, totally. Would you have a plane?
I'm sure the boss of the economy has a plane.
Well, I don't know. They might not let you have a plane if you're going to do shit like that, you radical man. I don't know. I mean, no one really knows. I mean, certainly not me, since I'm not an economist, but I think even economists don't know what would happen. And if radical reform were introduced like that, I don't know. I gotta think there would be quite a serious panic in major sectors of the economy that would cause capital to disinvest, and we might be fucked. That's the problem. There could be a capital strike. Strike, right?
This is a question I have for you as a historian and as a man who's lived through the 1970s. And Jimmy Carter's in hospice care right now, which is a big story. But I've heard people talk about the 70s being demoralizing economically. And people my age look at the 1970s and we see cheap houses and we see a McDonald's menu where a fillet of fish is 46 cents and it's $5 now. So we're like, this was the golden age in our eyes. So
fillet of fish is $5?
Yeah.
God damn. That's insane. I don't go to McDonald's often. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. What do you want to know about the 70s? The music was great.
Yeah. But was the economy demoralizing when there was like a gas shortage and the Jimmy Carter years, were they really that bad?
I remember the lines at gas stations. So my parents were poor in the 70s. I mean, like, poor. Their combined income in 1980 was $11,000. So it kind of didn't matter in a sense. Like, the very poor don't actually get affected much by, major changes in the economy like that.
Yeah.
They just
If you're living
remain
paycheck
poor.
to paycheck, you're always poor, regardless of what is happening in the broader economy, right?
Well, it's actually good because creditors are more lenient generally, and the IRS tends to be more lenient during those times. But yeah, no, I mean, there were a lot of problems. The thing is, I mean, it didn't seem, of course, I was 15 at the end of the 1970s. So, I mean, I was a kid, but it certainly, I'm not aware. It was not as bad as 2008. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, the thing about the 70s, as I understand it, is the economic crisis became structural, that there were structural problems in the economy. And this is when real wages, of course, began to decline. I think 1973 is the beginning of the decline in real wages, which hasn't stopped, by the way. And that's a very complicated story, but there were major things happening in the global economy and the American economy that led to sort of long-term change in the way we operate, and some for the better, some for the worse. But yeah, I don't know why. What are you getting at?
Well, I just think in general we're headed for some hard times. Yeah, I think
people keep saying that.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the problems of 2008 were never actually structurally solved, and Trump spent more than any president before him, and Biden's not slowing down the spending significantly. And, we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. And all the structural problems just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And with these bank failures, it looks like there's no place to put your money. And when the general public learns of that, there will be panic and despair. And I think we're headed for some really, really hard times. But I just think the general public isn't hip to how bad things are yet.
We've never seen this much money in the system before, ever.
Well, here's the point I'm making. Like, so a lot of economic speculators or people were ringing the alarm bells about coronavirus in the January and February of 2020. And they're like, why isn't the market crashing? Why isn't the market crashing? All these things in our supply chain are going to be completely disrupted by this virus. And then, it took until mid-March when all of a sudden there's no toilet paper on the shelves. So like things can get very, very bad very, very quickly. Yeah. And I see that happening again.
Although I guess the supply chain issue, did that get cleaned up? I haven't heard about the supply chain in a long time. I mean, it seems like that issue is gone. No one talks about it anymore. Are there still supply chain backups?
I think so. I think that's a huge part of all the inflation happening is, some of those supply chain issues were never solved.
Still? Really? Like the ports are still not moving goods the way they were?
No, I think things got through the ports, but it's complicated,
Okay. I remember during the pandemic that there was some incredible number of ships that were off the coast of Shanghai, which is the biggest port in the world, because they just didn't have a place to go or something. I don't know. Didn't have any place to put their stuff. Yeah. When I heard that, I just thought, man, that's an economy in free fall. I mean, if they can't even deliver goods, right? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, Michael. Since I was born, actually since before I was born, in fact, since the 19th century, Marxists and libertarians have been predicting the imminent collapse of capitalism every single year, every single week. If you look at Marxist and then later libertarian publications, journals, whatever, every week they're saying it's coming. Capitalism is about to fall. Our system is about to fall. And, we had the Great Depression, which was terrible, but even that wasn't as apocalyptic as some of the predictions I'm hearing now about what's going to happen. And again, these people could be right. I mean, Peter Schiff's whole career is based on this, is about predicting the imminent collapse of the system.
Yeah, he's been a bit of a chicken little. Yeah.
And he was right once, and he was only partly right, because the 2008 was a semi-collapse. It wasn't a total, obviously. I mean, there weren't bread lines. There weren't even bread lines after 2008, right? So, sure, a lot of people lost a lot of money. I know that, but it was not the kind of existential crisis that people are painting it out to be now. I don't know. That's all I know, is I know that smart people with those kinds of politics have forever predicted, have been Chicken Littles, and they haven't really been right ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's funny how you talk about the Marxists and the libertarians being like spiritual brothers, right? You've got Peter Schiff always talking about the collapse of the system, and the Marxists always talking about the end of capitalism. Again, the libertarian critique of those Marxists is our system is not free market capitalism at all.
Sure.
That it's a pretty centrally planned economy if you look at it all, and there's no accountability for the central planners.
Oh yeah, I just meant when I said capitalism, I meant the existing system, the existing economic system in the West. Yeah, right.
I do think.
No, I know.
Yeah. I do think we've got factory farming and we've got factories. So like our production is not going to collapse the way that it did in the 30s. I think that we're a lot more sophisticated. Our economy is to where people will still get fed, I think, if things get really bad. But I'm afraid some people might lose their retirements, and there's and it's the moral hazard of there being no safe place to park your money and no hope for young people of ever owning a home and things like that.
Maybe the scariest thing I've heard about or seen is the state pension crisis. And I haven't seen the fallout yet, but I saw a presentation about 3 years ago about this, and it terrified me that I think pretty much every state in the country will not be able to fund its pensions within 5 to 10 years, something like that. Like they can't pay people their pensions. They don't have the cash, and there's nothing, they don't have projected cash either that can do it. And I don't know what that's going to mean. I mean, that is something to be scared of if it's true. That's a horrific vision of old people being poor. That is not good.
Yeah. And then this is happening in France right now. The pension age is being raised. The retirement age in France is being raised. So similar to like the age in Social Security being raised, a similar thing is happening in France, and Macron has done it pretty much unilaterally, not through legislative processes. He invoked some emergency measures, and there's, I guess, rioting and protests happening right now in France because of this.
Wow. Yeah, you told me that before we started recording. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Macron, I mean, it seems like every week there are mass protests in the streets against Macron since, the yellow vests. When was that? Like 4 years ago?
Right before COVID. Right before COVID. Right.
Yeah, they were badass, man. They kicked some cop ass in the streets. Major protests, and there was just one like a few days ago, and also there have been protests against NATO. I'm not sure in France, but certainly in Germany and other places. But Macron is like the symbol of globalism. He's the man for globalism, and I don't know how he keeps winning elections, because I keep hearing how unpopular he is, and you see these mass protests in the streets against him, and somehow he keeps going. Maybe it's because of his wife, who's I think 40 years older than he is, something like that.
Yeah, this was a big point. And again, we're on the 3rd year anniversary of the lockdowns, and the world in 2019, late 2019, might have been fun for us because we were so innocent back then. But like, there are massive protests in Hong Kong, massive protests in Spain, massive protests in France. The world was very, very uneasy, and all the systemic problems that led to those conditions have only gotten worse over the last 3 years, even though this pandemic thing put it all on a pause. So again, we kicked a lot of problems down the road, and we're seeing them right now.
The chickens are coming home to roost. I like that. I mean, I think you're probably right. I'd have to research it more and think about it. But yeah, there were clearly some systemic problems as of March 2020. And that we're not clearly, and you're right, put on pause. So we kind of just don't know like what that will mean, what the effects of that will, but it's a massive global systemic disruptions, right? Over the last 4 years that have not been worked out really at all yet. And then you got the geopolitical situation where you have whole new blocks of countries like forming, alliances against each other, dividing up the world once again in radically different ways, and massive shift of power from the United States to China and Russia. And it's in the midst of an economic crisis, a global crisis. Mercy.
Yeah.
It sounds all bad, but then again, we human beings have been in worse situations before, or scarier situations before. Sometimes we had world wars as a consequence, and sometimes we didn't. It's just, we just don't know. And but it's scary, and there's some bad stuff that needs to be dealt with.
So we got a super chat, a perfect segue to start talking about foreign policy. Aren't you working on a book, Thad?
No, it's a myth. No. Okay. Next question. It's coming. Jesus
it's coming.
Christ. I was contracted a very long time ago by Grove Atlantic to write a book, and it was originally going to be about foreign policy in the Middle East only, and only for since World War II. Pretty, discreet, doable book. They said, no, we don't want that. We want you to write the entire history of the United States and the world, the relationship between the United States and the world, from the colonies to the present. We want the whole story, with every country the United States has been involved with, which is every country. We want the whole story. So this is why it's taken me so long, everybody. I've had to research unbelievable amount of stuff that I didn't know about in other countries, and the relationship between the US and Americans and other countries is monumental. But I am like 20 pages away, I promise you. Mm-hmm. I've written 12 chapters of the 13, and the 13th is almost done. So I really am in the final stages. It's just that, things have been busy around here, doing a lot with Unregistered Academy, and the new show Unreported, and Unregistered keeps going. And so that's my problem. If someone can pay me more, you have to do that stuff, and I could just have you do all that for me. I can actually write the book. Just send money, and you'll get your book. Yeah, that's it. If the next person who bothers me about finishing this book, send me money, and I'll finish.
He sent you a super chat, man.
Oh, okay. I'll finish the book. $5. Yeah. Okay, good. Let me go to work. I'll see you later.
Yeah. No, I'd never asked that question if there wasn't $5 attached to it.
I see. Thank you. I appreciate that.
But okay, so we are on the verge of World War III, and we've been talking about the China saber-rattling that's been going on. And I'm not making this up. Lindsey Graham was on Sean Hannity, and the people who lied us into the war in Iraq and who fell for it hook, line, and sinker are now peddling this new axis of evil, being Russia, China, and Iran. And they're insulting Joe Biden's masculinity in the process. This is something that people were doing to George H.W. Bush. Remember when they called H.W.?
That's a tall order, insulting Biden's masculinity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But remember when they were doing that to H.W.? He was like the wimp president.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they did it to Jimmy Carter as well. But yeah.
He's not mean enough against America's enemies. Mm-hmm. That's it. He's not aggressive enough. Yeah, I saw them talking about how I was even on Fox. It was talking about how I think it was, what's it called? Fox and Friends. They were talking about how they should send more drones, and they should send them into Russia. Go ahead. Yeah, let's see this.
Yeah.
So President Biden, you're the Rodney Dangerfield of world leaders. Nobody respects you. And if you don't change your game and up your game, we're going to have World War III. Here's the next war that's coming. Israel is going to have to take military action to stop the Iranians from developing enriched uranium to the point it can become a weapon. They're at 84%. All they have to do is get to 90%. We're not doing a damn thing about the Iranians trying to develop a nuclear bomb under our plain sight. I would like to know, we know that Russian drones were flying over Ukraine. Yeah. Why don't we shoot down 2 of theirs and send a message? You shoot down 1 of ours, we'll shoot down 2 the first time, 10 the next time. We're being walked up.
Has Sean Hannity never read Shakespeare?
Oh my God, this is insane. Lindsey Graham. I mean, even for Lindsey Graham, that is out there, man. He wants 2 wars. He wants to go to war with Iran and Russia directly. Holy smokes, dude. That guy is so ridiculous. And I mean, this is what happens when you won't come out of the closet. You have all this rage that's, from repressing your sexuality for decades, and you have to take it out on innocent people in foreign country.
Yeah. This is what happens when all the good men die in the Civil War in South Carolina. You're left with Lindsey Graham.
How does that fucker get elected? I don't understand. I really don't understand. Who's like passionate about Lindsey Graham? Who's a fan of Lindsey Graham, right? No, Trump cleaned his clock in South Carolina. I mean, he's way more popular than Graham in South Carolina. I don't get it. But yeah, this is terrible. This is terrifying. The neocons and the Lindsey Graham's not actually a neocon, really. He's a McCainite. He wants to fight everybody, but he's not interested in like remaking the world in America's image. He just wants to kill and win. They are on a rampage right now and calling for greater so this drone business, the Reaper drone that the Russians forced down, basically. This is amazing. Go ahead. Listen, you want to play this?
Oh, no. Keep talking. Sorry.
So, although she is cute, that new congressperson, I will say.
Yeah. Wait and see.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. So the Biden administration has, from the beginning of the war in Ukraine, said over and over again, we will not send drones. We will not send drones. We will not use our drones against Russia. We will not give drones to Ukraine. Our drones will have nothing to do with this conflict. And lo and behold, there's a drone flying over fucking Russian territory. How is that not a provocation by the United States? I don't even, this is the whole game of the US since 1991, has been to provoke Russia in all sorts of ways to get them to do something like invade Ukraine, to sort of show to the people that Russia is really the aggressor because we never invaded them. Ukraine never invaded them. We just built a military alliance right on their doorstep. And then we started sending drones over their territory. It's just one thing after another, engineering coups all across Eastern Europe. And now in Georgia, by the way, all these former Soviet states or neighbors of the Soviet Union of Russia now had all these governments change to governments that were hostile to Russia, that were controlled by the United States. These are some major provocations. I mean, this drone thing is just the latest. But I don't know, man. It's the biggest psyop in the history of the United States, which is saying a whole lot. The way they have sold this Ukraine war is just stunning to me, and how they get away with it and how really smart Americans just buy it hook, line, and sinker. In fact, including kind of a lot of people on our side, even a lot of anti-war people think that, we must arm Ukraine and this is a war of aggression and Russia is just evil and Putin is evil and he wants to conquer the world. None of that's true. None of that is true. It's not even close to being true. Navalny, this guy who wins the film about Navalny, wins the Oscar for Best Documentary the other night. Navalny's a fraud. It's been shown. He's a total fraud. He's changed his story many, many times. He's also like this incredible anti-Muslim racist. And the left, who loves him, they ignore that. It's all a goddamn fraud and a setup and an attempt. What we have is a 30-year campaign to frame Vladimir Putin and to demonize him. Let's see what she says.
Well, no, this is
another issue.
This is another issue. So, you got the Democrats going after Putin. And the censorship angle we never really talked about, but we need to. It's tough because with the banking thing, some Democrats were saying, "Oh, we should censor the internet to stop a bank run." Because if people have information that's scaring them online, we need to censor that information so nobody takes their money out of the banks. But then this is a separate issue. This is Anna Paulina Luna talking about why she decided to withdraw troops from Syria, or why she decided to vote to withdraw troops from Syria. So this is what the anti-war right that we were hoping for has to say about withdrawing troops.
Wow.
Peace is accomplished through superior firepower, strong leadership, and a plan, not blunders of failed foreign policy literally repeating itself. We have zero strategic advantage and zero reason to be in Syria. In fact, they don't even want us there. Al-Assad and Putin are tight, and if you actually check out some of Russia's naval warships, they're actually hanging out in the western port of Syria. What we need to be focusing on is bigger issues like China. Syria is a very dangerous place for us to be leaving a few hundred Americans. We are better off sending those troops on JSETs to places like South America, where we can build stronger and useful allies who will actually work with us. Make no mistake, if we take China at their word, a near-peer fight is coming, and it will require 100% of our military and more than the American people are going to pay for it. And that is why I support this resolution.
So yeah, we need to pull out of Syria so we can prepare for a global war against China.
She's not cute anymore. And this is the problem with MAGA. This is the problem with MAGA. They just need to fight China. That's all they care about. And they're going to try to turn everything, including the lab leak theory. They're going to just basically use that to go after China. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to pivot. You know, they're really great on not having war with Russia. But the reason is they want to direct all the resources, as she said, the entire military against China. It's no good either way. This is not any improvement over what the Democrats are peddling. This is incredibly reckless, dangerous, stupid. And yeah, we are talking about World War III if MAGA gets its way in foreign policy. Sorry to say. I guess she's sort of like moderately MAGA, but she's certainly in that camp on foreign policy. This is what they're all about these days, and it has to be countered. We have to be making arguments in public against this all the time. And I am anti-CCP, man. I mean, I bow to no one in my hatred of the CCP. I want nothing to do with that regime, and I hope they do fall. But the United States should have nothing to do with it. And in the meantime, just trade with China, which is all they want to do with us anyway. They're not interested in invading the United States. Does anybody think that China and Russia want to invade the United States and change our way of life? I mean, almost no one thinks that. And if that's the case, then they're not our business. They're simply not our business. Leave them alone unless they're on our shores or about to, mount an invasion of our shores. They're not. They don't want that. They just want to trade. They want to sell stuff to us and buy stuff from us. And that's it.
Yeah. But did you hear what Lindsey Graham was saying about Iran also, that he's bringing up the old line that Iran wants a nuclear program and that we need to be harsher on Iran. And, those feminists out there in Iran are, there's those protests in Iran that is getting the establishment to push for regime change. Bush said that the axis of evil was Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And Sean Hannity in another clip said there's another axis of evil right now, China, Russia, and Iran. So,
well, I mean, he's right that it's an axis. It is. They are certainly forming an alliance. Whether they're evil is up to theologians to determine. But are they a threat to us as Americans? And the answer is clearly no. I mean, there is no evidence that they are any kind of threat to the American homeland or to Americans generally. Zero, nada, nothing, except for the missiles that Russia has. Which is why you do diplomacy with them. You don't send drones over their airspace because they can react in ways that would kill everybody. But yeah, but Russia doesn't want to use those missiles either. They erected those missiles in response to America positioning missiles all across Europe directed at them. So I don't know. This is
it's demoralizing.
There's nobody good. There's nobody good on this in Congress, at least. Nobody. You're either an anti-Russia hawk or you're an anti-China hawk. That's your choice if you're in Congress.
Yeah. So there was a bill, HR 140. So the Twitter files happened. Matt Taibbi, all these journalists, they were questioned, and the Republicans wrote a bill to address the problems of the Twitter files, to fight the censorship, to basically say that no money can go towards censorship purposes, some wording like that. And this is what some Democrat representatives had to say about it.
Finally, we have H.R. 140, the Protecting Speech from Government Interference Act, which does not protect free speech from government interference. In fact, it seeks to expand the First Amendment to include Vladimir Putin and the Chinese Communist Party, while telling America's own federal law enforcement agencies that they are now forbidden from even notifying social media companies of attempts by Russia and the CCP to spread propaganda.
Oh,
I'm a moderate. I hate Russia and the CCP.
my goodness. Yeah, that's nice of him. Jim McGovern, big liberal from Massachusetts, I think he is. Big liberal. He's been in Congress for a long time. Oh, my goodness. The fact that this all stems from the Clintons' obsessive need to replace the Russian government. That's all this is. And to extend NATO into Russia. That's all this is. It began in the 90s. And every bit of policy since then has been directed at that. And they will do anything they can to make that happen, including destroying freedom of speech in this country. Yeah. So, I don't know what's new here. I mean, I could go on about how progressives like him have always been hostile to speech. They've just been pretended to be free speech warriors. What's your take? I mean,
no, I've got a lot of stuff from this week. I've got another clip of Kristi Noem. I've saber-rattling against China, bragging about banning TikTok in South Dakota. I got a clip of Jamie Raskin in a do-rag calling it the bill a Putin Protection Act. I just want the people out there to see just how aggressive Congress is getting right now. It's scary, man.
So they actually, and by the way, their target is us. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's journalists exactly like us. It's the group of journalists doing the work that we do, you and me on this show. They, of course, believe everything we say is in service of Putin, and they are arguing, am I correct, that our speech is Putin's speech, right? And they want to therefore they have the right to restrict our speech because Putin is not American, therefore he is not covered by the Bill of Rights. Our speech is Putin's speech. We are proxies for Vladimir Putin, and therefore we can and should be censored, is the argument. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Or we're proxies for the CCP.
Right. One or the other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or both.
Unbelievable. Now, here's the thing. We're teaching the Cold War now, started last night. And this is one of the themes, right? I talked about how it turned out with the release of the Venona files in the 1990s, we did find out that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and many other Americans who were accused of this actually were spies conducting espionage and sabotage for the Soviet Union, for Joseph Stalin directly in their case. That can happen. And I think there are people, in fact, I think there's a possibility that there are some people we know personally who have taken some money from the Russian government to say things in places like podcasts. Doesn't mean they're wrong, first of all. And also, it doesn't mean that we are agents of the Russian government. Did you get paid by them?
I'm hoping. No, but I'm begging. Any government out there, man. My hand's open. I'm for hire. I'm a good worker.
It's true McCarthyism. Now, McCarthy was, as I said, he was actually correct about some people in the government back in the 1950s. Some people did, in fact, work for the Soviet Union back then, but many did not, and they too were persecuted and lost jobs and were denied positions and were harassed and lost their families in some cases, went to prison, were censored relentlessly. I prove it, motherfucker. Prove that I am Julius Rosenberg, that I am an agent of Vladimir Putin, and then you can do whatever you want to me. Until then, I have a First Amendment right to speak without the government interfering in it, and that's it.
Yeah, and you got to prove it with an actual trial. Don't take away my other rights in the bill.
No, I meant prove. With all the due process. Yes, everything. Yeah. Now, until then, you don't even speak like that. Mm-hmm. That is totalitarian speak, bro. You don't even say that until you have proof that Alger Hiss was actually a spy for the USSR. Mm-hmm. You actually have proof. They don't have nothing. They just we say things that, are not hostile to Russia, and therefore we should have our speech censored. Goodness.
Yeah.
That's a Democrat. It's a liberal Democrat. Fuck.
Yeah. It's super deep. I don't get why these Democrats are so hawkish. We're running out of time. We are out of time.
Oh.
I wanted to say, did you see Chris Rock, his live special? Did you see that?
I've heard about it. I haven't even seen it.
He does talk about Will and Jada, and he uses that to close his special. He also uses the music by Ye at the end. I just want to keep documenting this, that you can't cancel Ye. He used that song about being in Paris.
Not on this show, you certainly can't. You can't cancel him here.
Nope. But I'm just saying, this artist is still, his work is still reverberating out there, that Chris Rock took a stand and played his music at the end of his special in a very brave move. He played that song about being in Paris. Yeah. I will say, though, Marlon Wayans has a better bit about the Will Smith, Jada, Chris Rock thing. So go on HBO Max and watch Marlon Wayans' special. It's really, really good.
Marlon's a funny dude. Yeah. Chris Rock's too right wing for me.
Yes, your boy Kamasi Hill talks about this a lot. That he's way more reactionary and way more offensive in his use of the N-word and his use of demeaning the black lower class and admonishing them for how they behave. Yeah.
And he's terrible on sex work, although maybe some people in the audience disagree with me on that, and they're terrible on sex work too. But yeah. I mean, I like some of his stuff a lot. I love some of his stuff, actually, and I think some of his stuff is just reactionary and nasty and mean and unnecessary. But he's definitely talented. I once saw him walk down the street in my neighborhood. Nice. He grew up right near where I used to live in Brooklyn. He was wearing a Mets hat. He was all by himself, and he was Chris Rock and just walking down the street. And he was like the only black guy in the whole street too. This is a totally irrelevant point. I'm just doing some name dropping. Well, we got to go.
Go ahead. Yeah, he's supremely talented, and his special was live, which I really appreciate. He made some mistakes, and you see them live, and I really appreciate him for doing that risk in the process. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. All right. So after every Unreported, Michael and I go to Unregistered Live, which is a live Zoom meeting with patrons of the show. We hang out for a long time after Unreported every Thursday night, right at this time. And all you got to do is be a patron of Unregistered at any level by going to, and we have something to play too, by going to patreon.com/unregistered and become a patron at any level. And the URL for the meeting we are going to is right there. You just click on it and you'll join us, and we get to say whatever we want there because it is unrecorded and it gets fairly wild. All right. Thank you, Michael. You are the man. This is awesome.
Yep.
What's up here?
We're going to play us out. Matty Geigs. Let me try to get the details right about him. He went to Occidental College right after you left. And he studied economics there. Yeah, big fan of yours.
Wow.
He's let me see.
Wow.
He's attending the Austrian Economic Research Conference at the Mises Institute this weekend. He's presenting his research on the economics of suicide, giving lectures. Wow. Yeah, alongside Walter Block and some other big names in the libertarian space. And he's a dope producer and put our amazing points over some sick beats.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll see you on the other side and we'll play us out. Right. At Baori, Baiori on SoundCloud.
That are just
Thank you, Baori.
And even heroin and cocaine. Those drugs are way less addictive than we believe, way less damaging and harmful. We all know people who did heroin and cocaine at some point, and guess what? They don't do it anymore. There just aren't enough hard drug users. And we need to encourage more hard drug use. I smoked crack and I did meth when I was in college. I haven't done them since. I didn't get hooked. I didn't get addicted. Nothing bad happened to me at all. It's a huge myth that has really undergirded the whole war on drugs. These myths are the reason we still have this war on drugs, because people think that they are that dangerous. And drugs are that dangerous and that harmful that we just cannot allow them to be legalized. But then again, look at Portugal. 15 years, I think it is now, they've had legalized drugs, and all the bad things have declined. Addiction rates have declined, drug use has declined, deaths from overdoses have declined, all of it. It's just, we know this. We know the legalization of drugs is an unmitigated good, but we just don't do it, except for marijuana.
People are terrified of heroin, but they really don't understand it in that, like, all the opioids out there are way, 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 way stronger than heroin, and everybody gets prescribed that.
Did you see my friend Leighton Woodhouse, who's going to be on the show tomorrow? He just tweeted today about I think a 15-year-old girl in a public school, LA public high school. She OD'd on the campus of the high school during school because she had just bought and taken a pill from a drug dealer that she thought was Percocet, but actually was fentanyl. She's dead now. Legalized drugs, that doesn't happen. God.
And
so
heroin is literally only dangerous because of the overdose risk.
You know what?
Well, you can dose it out, you know.
Heroin doesn't kill unless you're very stupid with it. Yeah. But you know what does kill, Michael? You know what does kill? Puritanism. It's killed hundreds of thousands of people and incarcerated millions. Puritanism, this idea that drugs are evil. That is the reason we have a war on drugs. That is why we have this world war against the people who use drugs. Abolish Puritanism.
Yeah.